Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of William Mary's 4th Annual Professionals Week. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks for William Mary. It is my pleasure to work with you and thousands of others from the William Mary community throughout the year, providing career resources and professional programming that support your respective career journeys. The theme of this year's Professionals Week is rethinking your relationship with work, and today we will focus on building community in the workplace. What does it mean to bring your whole and authentic self to work? How does diversity strengthen a workplace? Before I turn things over to my colleague and co-event planner, Ivana Marshall, to say a few words about William Mary's Asian Centennial celebration and the leadership circles, I just want to run through a few technical items to cover. First, today's session is being recorded, and we will notify all of you once the recording is posted to wmalumni.com. Questions are welcome, and our speakers will address as many questions as time will allow. If you roll over the bottom portion of the Zoom window, you should see a Q&A icon appear. Please use that feature to submit your questions, and we will monitor the Q&A throughout the hour. Now it is my pleasure to invite Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement and Inclusion Initiatives, Ivana Marshall, to welcome all of you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I am most excited for this Professionals Week partnership. As Michael shared, my name is Ivana Marshall. I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement and Inclusion Initiatives at William & Mary, where I serve as the staff liaison to 3 of our identity-based alumni communities: Asian Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, Southwest Asian, Crim-Del Association, and Latinx alumni. In addition to Professionals Week and the William & Mary Alumni Association, William & Mary is celebrating the Asian Centennial, which commemorates the admission of Chin Pukao, 1923, our first student from Asia, and celebrating the contribution of the preceding generations of students of Asian, Pacific Islander, and Middle Eastern descent. Before I ask our phenomenal panelists to introduce themselves, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our lovely moderator, Erika Moritsugu, alumna from the class of 1994. Among her many roles and identities, which we will hear about today, Erika L. Moritsugu was appointed by President Joe Biden in April 2021 to serve as Deputy Assistant to the President and Asian American and NHPI Senior Liaison. With a distinguished career in federal government and nonprofit advocacy, she has spent her professional and personal life fighting for social justice and the empowerment of communities and individuals. At the White House, Erika supports the administration on a wide array of the president's priorities and engages with Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, or NHPI, communities and leaders on important issues such as advancing safety, justice, inclusion, and opportunity for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities through a whole of government approach to racial justice. Her past government service includes serving as the Assistant Secretary for Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations at the Department of Housing and Urban Development under the leadership of Secretary Julian Castro in the Obama administration, and was the first ever Senate Deputy Legislative Director at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. On Capitol Hill, she was a senior representative of Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, Senator Daniel K. Akaka of Hawaii, and at the Senate Democratic Policy Committee under Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada. In the nonprofit sector, Erika led 2 teams, the National Partnership for Women and Families for Economic Justice and Congressional Relations, advancing workforce and health policies focused through a gender equity and race equity lens. Erika has also led the Government Relations, Advocacy, and Community Engagement team at the Anti-Defamation League, a leading anti-hate organization. Erika, over to you.
Ivana, thank you very much. Take a breath. I'm obviously old enough to have a really long biography, so I apologize to y'all, but aloha, everyone. Let me first begin by re-thanking Ivana and Michael and all of the folks from William & Mary who made today possible. I'm incredibly humbled to be facilitating this discussion, and I'm honored to be in conversation with this esteemed lineup of alumni panelists about what it means to bring your whole and authentic self to your work and the workplace. I've spent my entire career grappling with these questions of identity, representation, and coalition building, not only in a personal sense, but also professionally on behalf of other individuals and communities. On the Hill for some of the best senators in history, during the Obama administration serving some of the best agency missions in government, and in the NGO world for the ADL and, working across religious and race lines based on the Jewish principle of Tikkun Olam, repair the world, and at the National Partnership for Women and Families, where I was a professional angry feminist fighting for economic justice and health justice through a gender lens. And it was throughout these meandering professional experiences that I've constantly built upon these experiences to support and empower the Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. One of my biggest takeaways from the NGO world from my time at the ADL and the National Partnership was the importance of coalition building. Throughout American history, we've seen time and time again that the strongest civil rights efforts are those that are born from interracial and interreligious coalitions that embrace the idea that we are stronger together. In my current position, I'm constantly building upon these experiences. And because of the incredible diversity of the Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities, who hail from more than 20 countries with 800 spoken dialects and languages, our communities face a unique array of challenges. And it's also important we recognize that individuals are never just one thing. 2.5% of Asian Americans and 7.2% of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders are military veterans. 3% of LGBTQ+ folks identify as AN and HPI. 57% of Asian Americans were born in another country. People from Asia make up about 14% of unauthorized immigrants, and 4.4% of AA and NHPIs identify as disabled. It's this diversity that is exactly what makes our communities so rich and so special. This great diversity means that individual groups of struggles are often masked by larger subpopulations in the overarching clumsy acronym of AAN and HPI. My lived experience as a Japanese American and Chinese American family came over 4 and 5 generations ago to work on plantations as indentured servants in Hawaii is very different from a Burmese refugee, or what we call the 1.5 generation Korean Americans, let alone the generational trauma held by Native Hawaiians whose kingdom was colonized and overthrown, or our Pacific Islander brothers and sisters who've only ever known imperialism and isolation for the generations that they've been here. But because of my own experience and my adjacency to others, and my work in interracial and interreligious coalitions, it does mean that I may be more aware of what I don't know, and that I know that I need to pause and ask, which can be an asset around decision-making tables, to surface the impacts on communities that have been traditionally invisible, too easily scapegoated, and to embrace that power of collective action when we come together. In Congress and across the administration, in the private sector where I began my career as a lawyer, it's important that we honor the unique histories, cultures, traditions, and contributions that communities and individuals bring to this work, no matter where we sit in government or civil society or in the private sector. That extra time and labor it takes to work through the tensions, to educate each other, to listen to each other, to be aggressively curious about each other, we can find where our commonalities are across racial and religious and geographic and generational, even political and ideological lines, so that we can build an America where all values are represented and reflected. So with that, mahalo for the opportunity to share this space with you tonight. And now we get to turn to the feature event of our evening, our distinguished panel. In the follow-up email that you got after you had RSVP'd audience members, you received a full biography of all of the panelists that are here, but I thought it would be nice to begin with our panelists briefly introducing themselves with, your name, your William and Mary degree, and for you, Doug, that's degrees, obviously, class years, pronouns, and share both your full-time work, nonprofit work, and any other community involvement. Nina, can we start with you and then go to Rita, Aman, and Doug? Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. It's so great to be here with everyone, with the panel, with the William and Mary community. My name is Nina Cavazos. I am the Director of Corporate Relations at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, or CHCI. Pronouns she, hers, class of William and Mary 2013. And really looking forward to the conversation tonight, talking about the Latinx community and my experience and work there.
So I will jump in. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'm Rita Sampson. My pronouns are she and her. I am currently the Director of Equal Employment Opportunity at the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. I am a longtime Fed, so I have worked within the intelligence community, within federal law enforcement, and within the Department of Justice in various attorney roles and other executive roles. And so it is just really an exciting chance to be here. We had some pre-meeting where we built community before we even started this discussion. And so just the notion of being able to continue it, I appreciate that. In my other life, I am working as part of the Martin Luther King, the Memorial Foundation in Washington, D.C., where we are advocating for the continuation of the values of Martin Luther King and preserving the monument as a place for all in this country. So that's it.
I'll jump in. I'm Amandeep Sidhu. I'm class of 2000, economics and government. So I knew Morton Hall very, very well. Pronouns are he and him. I'm a partner at the law firm of Winston Strawn here in Washington, D.C., where I focus on investigations and litigation in the healthcare and life sciences space. I'm also a co-founder of the Sikh Coalition, which is the largest civil rights advocacy organization in the United States that was founded in the wake of 9/11 in response to the violent hate crimes, employment discrimination, and profiling that the Sikh community faced. And really honored to be here with this panel this evening.
Doug Bunch, also glad to be here. Thanks so much, Erika, for hosting us. I am a member of the class of 2002 and of the law school class of 2006. My pronouns are he, his. I'm a partner at the law firm of Cohen Milstein, Sellers and Toll here in Washington, D.C., where I litigate class actions on the plaintiff side, mostly adverse to large U.S. corporations, bringing claims for violations of the federal securities laws, antitrust laws, consumer laws, civil rights, and human rights violations. I also am chair of Global Playground, a multinational nonprofit that builds schools, libraries, and other educational infrastructure in 11 developing countries around the world, and serve on William & Mary's Board of Visitors. And I'm also very active in the LGBTQ community, both in Virginia and here in DC.
Thanks, Doug. So I'm going to begin with a series of questions about your personal journey to where you sit professionally. I guess I'd start with a question about how your identities show up in your workplace and within your professional associations. Nina, I would love to start with you and then move to Aman, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my current role at CHCI, Latino culture, Latino heritage, Latinidad, which is a pretty, sometimes an elegant word that we use to talk about some of the shared bonds that Latinx communities have in America. It just is infused in every part of my day-to-day. It's been profoundly impactful for me personally to be in an office or virtual office the past 2 years every day with a majority Black and brown staff. My bosses are Latino, my teammates are Latino, everyone I have meetings with, it feels like it's just, everyone's Latino, and it just feels so wonderful. And looking back at some of the other professional experiences I've had, while very valuable experiences, I did not know until I was at CHCI how much I needed this and how much I was craving it, to be in my community and to be able to feel comfortable to live that part of myself every day at work. It's liberating, I would say, in a sense. You know, there's a level of comfort, of familiarity, instant bonds made between myself and people, you know, like, oh my gosh, my parents, like my family's from there, you know, it's so incredible. And it's huge because when you think about, you know, who were the people who formed our government, who are the leaders in and around Capitol Hill, sometimes I don't feel like I can readily relate to them. And, you know, it's been so influential for me to be able to feel like okay, maybe I can't relate to these people, and maybe these certain groups of people in and around Capitol Hill. And maybe I might feel like me and some of my community members don't have as easy of access to those networks of power and influence. I have my community here at CHCI and in the Latino networks in and around DC. And, having that community of powerful, smart, ambitious, hardworking Latinos, which are qualities that all Latinos share, but here in DC, it's been incredibly rewarding and fulfilling both personally and professionally.
Thanks, Nina. I mean, I think it speaks really to this, both why representation matters, but also how, and if you don't mind me saying, like, especially for women of color, that we need to build community. They're not examples in nature that just crop up where you can feel a belonging, and often that can feel very isolating. And so when it comes together the way that you found a home for your heart and your mind is really resonant, I think, for a lot of folks. Aman, can I turn to you for your reflections? I can repeat the question if you want.
Absolutely. So it's really incredible to hear, Nina, that level of comfort and inclusivity that you've been able to experience. And I think that, looking at the legal profession and my journey, it has been very different. And so coming into a profession that has historically lacked diversity, particularly at the highest levels of management and leadership, I've seen that evolution over the last 15 or 16 years that I've been practicing. When I decided to get on the path of joining a large law firm, I was one of a very, very small handful of observant Sikh Americans that were in the big law world. I mentioned to Rita, one of my colleagues and mentors who I met while I was an undergrad at William & Mary, who was in the law school, and we became very close friends. And he was one of the first Sikhs to go to a big law firm, and I followed in his footsteps and did the same. And when I made partner in 2013, I was the first turban-wearing Sikh partner in U.S. history at an AmLaw 100 firm. So that's how small the universe was with the Sikh community, and thankfully that has grown and expanded. And so by being a very visible ethnic minority with a turban and beard, the idea of covering in the vein of Kenji Yoshino and his research, or the idea of, do you bring your authentic self to the workplace, with Ritu Bhasin and other DEI professionals that speak to that authenticity, I've been left with no choice. And so my entire journey from my time growing up in Richmond, Virginia, to William & Mary for undergrad, or coming back to Richmond for law school, clerking on the Virginia Court of Appeals, and now being in the world of big law, it has been a series of firsts. And as a result, I have recognized the importance of not explaining myself, but sharing my story. And what I've tried to do is do that in a more organic way than I might otherwise have had to do. And I've done that through the partnership I've been able to balance with the pro bono work I do with the Sikh Coalition. So despite the fact that I had these origins of helping to found a nonprofit, and I'm sort of dichotomously a partner at a big law firm, I've been able to bring that work to the workplace. And because of the significant work we've done over the years, in the last 16, 17 years, we've been able to sort of get the front page New York Times stories about the work that we are doing. And by osmosis, it has sort of encouraged my colleagues to learn about the Sikh faith and my identity and sort of where I come from. But I'm also very open to those conversations. And I think that's been part of the journey that I've had, is one of being very open to having those conversations.
Any thoughts on this question about how your identities show up in your workplace and within your professional association?
I think there are threads of what everyone has said so far that resonate. Like Nina, I feel like I'm lucky to work at a place that embraces diversity in all its respects, but in particular LGBTQ diversity. Like Aman, though, when I became a partner, I was the first openly LGBTQ partner at my firm. Although the LGBTQ community, broadly speaking, in the laws is widely represented. But to your point, Erika, representation does matter. And it allows me at my firm to be able to speak to unique issues and cases and to decisions to litigate that might not otherwise have voices. We were retained by the Virginia ACLU and by Equality Virginia to represent them in an amicus brief on behalf of trans students in Virginia public schools, and in particular, the Virginia Department of Education's ability to issue regulations to protect those kids in schools. That's a connection that I was able to make and speak for as a result of bringing my identity to the table at my firm. Likewise, several years ago, we litigated against ExxonMobil for discriminating against LGBTQ people in hiring. Another instance of a moment when being able to bring an LGBTQ voice to the table mattered. I'm also the only openly LGBT member of William & Mary's Board of Visitors, which matters daily in my ability to speak on behalf of those students and alumni. So certainly my identity, although woven seamlessly in what I do as a professional, matters tremendously.
Well, I'll add on to that question. I think it's an excellent question. You probably didn't notice, but I'm an African-American woman. That's kind of like the running joke. As you walk into the room, you realize that you walk into the room with an identity, whether or not it's internal or certainly that external appearance. And so I have grown to embrace what I bring when I walk into the room, and have really dedicated a large part of my career to making sure that others in the workplace have that same opportunity to show up and be their true selves or their best selves. And to me, that's a calling, probably driven by the fact that when I first started working, people would tell you, that first job, you need to figure out a way to fit in. And it was the whole notion of fit in and assimilation. And it was almost, instilled upon you that this is what you need to do. And then when the light clicked, you had that moment where you realize, actually, no, I am such a better person. I am such a better professional, more effective all the way around when I simply embrace who I am and I show up, and then let the chips fall where they may. So my identity, I'm having fun with it. I fully embrace it. I don't hide it. And I think it's a superpower, and I try to use it every day.
And we're the beneficiary of it too, Rita, because it's not an easy thing either. I mean, I do want to just interject with one personal reflection about recognizing my own privilege, having grown up in Hawaii, where we have many examples in a white dominant culture of Asian Americans and Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders who are leaders in business and in law and in politics. And so I grew up not knowing what it was like to be othered or not to reach for what the art of the possible is until I moved to the mainland. I did not start at William & Mary, so this is not a slight on white William & Mary, but when I was in college, finding myself to be the only person of color or woman of color, got a lot of bad advice, honestly, about assimilation. And when I went to a law firm, to have my mentor say, just say something. It doesn't matter if you're repeating something that somebody else said, right? Awful advice. It's not authentic to me. I really believe in stretching, but not denying my whole self either. And I think that that's what you speak to in a large part. For the next question, which kind of dovetails onto this piece, I was actually interested in, Aman and Doug, for you guys to start off on this, but because of the way that you're able to balance. And when we talk about bringing your whole self to work, you kind of balance it out because you've started nonprofit organizations, even as you're doing like, technical legal work and representing clients. So the question is how you've applied who you are and what you've learned over the course of your lifetime to the work that you do, whether it's your day job or the sidebar volunteer fund that's also very, very hard. But I think informed by your own lived experience and the values that you bring to work. Can I start with you?
Absolutely. So thank you for the question. I mentioned briefly that I grew up in Richmond, and when my parents first came to the United States, they came by way of Northern India, Punjab, through England for a couple of years, and then settled in Virginia. And I was born in Norfolk, and we moved to Richmond when I was very young. And growing up, I learned that my parents were the second Sikh family in Central Virginia. And I was telling my daughters the story the other day as they were doing a family heritage project. They wanted me to tell them a story I hadn't told them before. And I told them, I've been involved in this work with the Sikh Coalition, but I want to tell you about the origins of why I care so much, like why this matters. And I remember my dad, who's a physician, but was in a small community outside of Richmond. He would go to different community centers and Lions clubs and church groups where patients or friends in the community were curious about why he looked different and what the turban and beard meant and what it meant to be a Sikh. And so he, out of sort of self-preservation and community engagement, felt obligated to give those folks his time and go and carry the slide deck that was in a slide projector. So that's sort of dating me, and carrying those slides with us to these different community events. And I would go with him as a middle schooler, and when I went into high school, I was a little bit older and able to participate with him. And that sort of was the groundwork that I carried into my time at William & Mary, where I was one of only a handful of turban-wearing Sikhs that had ever come through the campus's doors. And I was a member of the Phi Kappa Tau fraternity, and one of the things I would do during pledge period was not the crazy things you would expect of a pledge period, but I would do a Sikhism 101 program for all of the pledges. Because I thought if someone is going to try to start a fight or make a racially motivated comment, that it wasn't just going to be me defending myself. It was going to be all these people who are my brothers. They should understand and know who I am and why I look the way I do. And so when 9/11 happened, it was sort of this moment for the Sikh community that was so unbelievably profound, when there was this unmistakable backlash against the Muslim community and brown communities and all communities that were perceived to be connected to terrorism. It was just a no-brainer that we needed to sort of jump out and do this work. And so when I decided to go back to law school and sort of unexpectedly went down this path of big law. It was, if you had asked me 1L year, 2L year, or even 3L year, am I going to be at big law ever, yet let alone 16, 17 years later, partner at now 2 different law firms? The answer would have been absolutely not. But when I decided to go down that path, I knew that it had to be with some balance, where I felt like I was able to continue to do some good work in the community. And so we forged this pro bono partnership at my prior firm, McDermott, Will & Emery, and now at Winston & Strawn, that have resulted in somewhere in the vicinity of $7 or $8 million of pro bono legal services at this point, over the course of multiple campaigns, most significantly on military religious discrimination and reintegrating the U.S. military to allow observant Sikhs to serve. And so the question of sort of how I've brought that to the workplace, it's sort of been pervasive throughout everything I've done. And at a practical level, in the Sikh faith, we believe in absolute equality between men and women, caste, color, creed, and a true belief in democracy, and just a general belief in sort of rationality and civility. And so when I think about my style as a lawyer, it is not to be the loudest, most obnoxious voice in the room. It is the thoughtful, reasoned, speak when I have something, you know, that people need to hear. And I think it served me pretty well. So that's sort of how I've tied all those pieces together.
That's amazing. I will say that founding one of the most important civil rights organizations is no small feat. This is a personal observation. On September 13th, when I was in Mesa, Arizona with Sobiji's family, the anniversary of his murder, I brought with me a message from the president that I read from the stage. And he, in his voice, in his words, the president talks about Shadi Kala and how that animates so much of what is best about the world, if only we could name it. So thank you for your leadership on that.
No, thank
Doug,
you. And I mean, just going to the point of sort of why representation matters, and having you in the role that you're in matters, and who's in the White House matters. That voice that you brought to, you know, referring to Balbir Singh Sodhi, who was the first person to be murdered in a hate crime following 9/11, within just a few short days after the 9/11 attacks. You coming to Indianapolis after the FedEx mass shooting last spring, all of those things matter. And I think we're just at the cusp of dramatic change and representation, and what that means to the communities we're part of and we represent.
No, that's right. And it is an extraordinary thing when what you've described, and I think that Doug will also, but it's for sure the truth that I live, when the personal and the professional merge and we get to live our best selves and bring that to our workplace. But Doug, you don't just pay the bills by being a fancy lawyer for your clients, but you started a nonprofit as well. Can I ask you to reflect on this question about the application of, what you've learned?
Absolutely.
About yourself and the work that you do?
Absolutely. And I'll also say that we need more lawyers with Aman's approach to this style of litigation in the world. I could give you a few counterexamples from conversations today. But I think that I'm very lucky to work at a law firm that lets me do it all, that lets me run a nonprofit and serve on a public university board and be a litigation partner. And honestly, I would not be the same lawyer if it were not for my experience building schools all over the developing world. I wouldn't be the same nonprofit leader if it weren't for my background as a lawyer. And I wouldn't be the same board member at William & Mary if it weren't for both of those things. The perspective that one brings to the other is invaluable to me. And I couldn't imagine only doing one or the other. And I'm fortunate to be at a place that embraces that. And I think that that's something that, certainly as students graduate and go off into the professional world, that they should look for, is a place where they too can feel that they're embraced as being their full selves. My partners at my firm come to Global Playground's annual events. We hire more paralegals from William & Mary than probably any other school. And likewise, as part of Global Playground and at William & Mary, people are very interested in what I do in those other places. And I feel like I'm never siloing myself from place to place. I always feel like I can sort of fully embrace who I am in any one of those lines. And, I think that I mentioned perspective, and to Aman's point a few moments ago, I think the path that led me to where I am now had a strong role in shaping that perspective. I'm from Augusta County in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, which is a relatively conservative place compared to a place like DC or certainly the professional world that I live in now. My dad drove a UPS truck and my mom was a public school teacher. I'm the first person in my dad's side of the family to go to college. And that background, I think, has bred perspective. It's bred emotional awareness and sensitivity to people who are different than I am. Even as a gay man living in DC, it's bred sensitivity and perspective. And I think that those, that composite identity is what's led me to be a lawyer who, similar to Aman, approaches his job as someone who listens to opposing views, who tries to build consensus, who tries to understand his opponent's position in a way that lets us hopefully reach middle ground, common ground. And that's the same approach I bring to being a board member. It's the same approach I bring to being a nonprofit leader. So the skills and the identity that you form through those experiences and through that perspective really are applicable across the board.
Thank you, Doug. Nina, do you have any thoughts on this? And then Rita, please.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about bringing myself, but I also feel like at my current position, very fortunate to work with so many Latinos who are immigrants themselves, children of immigrants. I'm a child of an immigrant. I feel like I also every day bring my family to work with me, and just I think about them all day and every day, and just thinking about my grandfather, he didn't finish elementary school, and the sacrifices that he made to bring his family across the border into America to give them a better life. And, I think that, for me personally, I'm not only thinking about bringing myself to work, I'm thinking about bringing my family to work.
I guess
Rita?
I'm just, first off, I'm in awe at the panelists and my ability to be here tonight. So this has been really powerful for me. I think that what I've been able to bring from my identity is the commitment to service. Obviously, I work in public service, but I think at the core of my culture is the need to serve others, and a compelling obligation to take whatever gifts you have and give those to others. And so that's how I was raised in Norfolk. So Aman, back home, 757. And in the Presbyterian church, right? So that's a little bit different. Most people are like, oh, Black people go to Baptist churches, but I wasn't. I was raised in the Presbyterian church. I was raised by very multi-generational, highly educated family. But the one thing they told us is that you use the gifts that you have for the service of others. And so I think that's what I bring. And it's what gives me the most satisfaction in knowing that I am giving what I have, whatever it is, in the service of others. And on a day-to-day, that really just looks like conversations. The number of people who come in to have a conversation. And I wasn't really aware that I was impacting people in this way. But when you think about, oftentimes I was the only senior executive of color. And I wasn't aware that people were looking at me in that way, and that they appreciated those conversations in the hallway or in the coffee, or when they're having a bad day, those kind of conversations. And so I think it's being able to relate and being able to have an obligation to really share that's the connection that I think that I make. And I love the idea of coalition building, because it's not just people who look like me, it's people from all kinds of backgrounds. And if we connect, there's power there. And that's what gives me the energy, is just the power of connection and trying to make that happen.
Thank you, Rita. That's I get a little goosebumps thinking about the power that we always know resides within us, and then collectively what that means, because it's something that we can sense in ourselves, but it's something that we can actualize in the real world, and kind of make the world that Doug and Aman are enjoying now, or the community that Nina goes to work as a part of, to look forward to, because that's work that has preceded us. That has not always been the case, to be able to walk into a safe space and to be your authentic self, or to advocate for a different take than might have been the norm or traditional in a law firm setting. And so I'm wondering whether we could segue into a conversation about how you gathered buy-in for your cause in this professional environment, seeing what you bring and making that real or tolerated, in the workplace. Aman, do you mind if I start with you with this question?
Happy to. So, this is very specific to my experience in the law firm world, but I don't think it's any different in sort of the evolution of diversity, equity, and inclusion being, an increasing, not just sort of sideshow of the conversation, but front and center as one of the primary components of any conversation in corporate America. So 2007, when I came into the law firm world as a junior associate, I served on my prior law firm's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, I guess Diversity Committee at that time. And it was a lot of preaching to the choir. And so while there was an emphasis on diversity, and certainly I was a benefit, I benefited from the importance of diversity and the fact that I was able to bring that voice to the conversation, the incremental change has been very disappointing, right? So you look at the number of female African-American partners, equity partners at law firms, and it has moved, 1/4 of a percentage point in the last 15 years. And you can sort of apply that into the other minority communities in different ways. And so one of the things I've seen happen more and more over the last, my time, again, 15 years, is the importance of allyship, and that it's not just each of the sort of minority or ethnic groups in one bucket operating in a silo, but rather the collective voice that we bring together to the table, and sort of the not competing to look at, who we have in management from, the Latinx community or the API community or the African-American community, but rather collectively, how are we all coming together and how are we rising up together? And it's no, accident that the partners I worked closest with, that I left my old firm to go to my new firm with, are lawyers of color. And we came to a firm that truly values diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has a chief diversity officer who's dedicated to making this, front and center of the conversation. And I'm really proud of the fact that we have a diversity and equity and inclusion committee that is made up solely of partners. And it is not just diverse partners, it is senior office managing partners, it is heads of practice groups, it's members of the executive and compensation committees. It is a group that reflects the diversity that also includes the majority, and it is decision makers, and it is folks that have influence. And so I serve on that committee now at Winston. And I've just seen this sort of, the again, evolution of the conversation in a way where there is a recognition that it is not just the right thing to do. It makes absolute business sense. It is a priority of our clients. I have a cohort of folks that do a certain amount of work on my team that happen to all be men. 2 Black men, myself, so we are a diverse group, but we don't have a woman on that particular team for this particular type of work we do. And I had a client, female general counsel, say, "You are very dude heavy and you got to fix that." And that's exactly what she should be saying to us. And so despite the fact that we have, a wildly diverse team, a recognition that that diversity has to cover every one of those bases, because it is, it is a priority for our clients. It is a priority in corporate America, and by extension, through the business community. So that's been, my experience is that the conversation really has shifted pretty dramatically in the last decade in particular.
Thank you. Nina, I know you have thoughts on this as well. I'm wondering if you could reserve a little bit of your reflections about the work that you do externally. I worked with your predecessor in corporate relations, and so I know that you need to get buy-in from mainstream dominant culture society about why this is a value proposition that they should invest in and sponsor. So how do you gather buy-in for your cause, internally and externally?
Yeah, I mean, externally, that's a huge part of my job in my role at CHCI, is raising serious amounts of capital from the private sector that gets invested directly into young Latino leaders, making an absolute difference in their communities and on Capitol Hill. And I find that getting buy-in requires storytelling. And I think that it really is, to do it effectively, it requires a positive story. I think, as Aman mentioned, a lot of companies made very serious and very bold commitments to social justice and social equity in the summer of 2020 after the murder of George Floyd and nationwide protests. And they should have made them. and hopefully, they're sticking to them. But what does it mean for a tech company to say they're combating disinformation and misinformation when, Spanish language platforms go completely unchecked and less than 5% or 7% of the STEM workforce is Latino? What does it mean when financial services companies, say they're committing to investing in underserved communities when 30% of low-income Black and Latino households remain unbanked? And those families were some of the hardest hit and most devastated families during the pandemic and during the recession. Those are realities, but those aren't quite positive stories. Those, that's not something fun to keep talking about. And you can certainly talk about that and name it, and I think that we should. But I think that also what I found in getting buy-in is telling a positive story and starting from a position of strength for my community. The story that I tell to our corporate partners is that, America's future is Latino. Latinos are some of the youngest demographics. We are one of the most likely demographics to start their small business. Latinas actually are the fastest growing demographic in small business growth. Truly an economic engine for this country. When you look at the Latino communities, they're early adopters of technology, and 30% of the American population, 30% of the American workforce is going to be Latino by 2050. And for me personally, the idea of like a young, vibrant, multiracial democracy is very exciting to me. And when I talk about that and talk about that future, we can talk about what that means to feel not only excited about that future, but also to feel responsible for creating that future. And I think that that's kind of how I personally find my way in creating buy-in.
Thank you, Nina. Rita, this question I'm going to pose to you as kind of a follow-on to that. When the roles that you've played in government as an EEO lead, it's not always a matter of buy-in, but about advocacy in a tense environment, right? And you don't know this, but I'm also very familiar with your work at OPM these past couple of months and what you were endeavoring to do there from a system-wide process, building on, the 12 years you spent in the IC, helping folks navigate and problem solve or be adversarial. I'm wondering if you could share with us how we could learn about how to break the tension of prejudice in the workplace and beyond in effective ways when again, I don't mean to harp on the intelligence community, but like, that's rot. That's really rot. We don't see a lot of folks like the folks who look like this Zoom screen in The Hunt for Red October or whatever. Right? And so much of it is opaque as well. But breaking the tension of prejudice in the workplace and beyond in effective ways. I'm wondering if you have some wisdom to share with us.
Right. Yeah. So I would say I have some lived experience, but both personal and also operational. So I think that because I'm able to bring my perspective and my world experience in a role that calls upon me to be a voice, a credible voice. The first thing I had to do, and I think William and Mary provided a great foundation for that, is to understand the diversity of people around me and understand that they all come from a unique environment as well. And I think going into any kind of conversation, understanding that it's not just my perspective, but it's other people's perspective. And if I can stand in their shoes, then maybe they can stand in my shoes, right? And that looks like some of those conversations that we used to have in the dorms, right? Where people would say, honestly, Rita, I've never talked to a Black person before today. And you're like, what? You're 18 years old. You can't possibly have that story. But those stories were great stories because they were honest stories. And they all ended great because we were able to take that wall down and share and trust that it's going to be okay. And you kind of take that to the workforce, and you're at a workforce where perhaps a person has never seen or worked with a person of color, or a person from the LGBTQ plus community, or a religious minority, and they have in their mind a certain viewpoint. So for me, it was understanding that people came from a different viewpoint, that not all was intended to marginalize, and then to try to meet people where they were, and to speak language that talked about bias and the unconscious bias, and to move beyond unconscious bias to intentional inclusion, right? So saying to the leaders, okay, we all get that the whole bias thing exists. The question is, what are you personally going to do about it? Are you willing to grow? And then giving people the tools to grow: education, the training, the exposure, the cross-cultural interaction. And then helping to open up conversations about things like stereotype threat. How when you believe that somebody looks at you and treats you a certain way because of what your appearance or your stereotype is, that actually diminishes your performance. So helping people understand that you got to break free from all of these things that bind you from being your best self. And we don't have the kind of time this evening. So let me just say, it's not easy, but you just have to be consistent, and finding the leaders and the allies and having very diverse coalitions will help make progress. And that's what I did.
Thank you, Rita. I wise words, obviously. And it does, you speak about diversity and about allyship, and, wanting to work towards a beloved community that where inclusion is a natural standard operating procedure. We're not there yet. It takes work. Mm-hmm. Doug, I'm wondering, you as the first ever and sometimes the only, how have you seen examples of allyship or fellowship amongst people who have, one identity or multiple identities that, have traditionally been oppressive, to build community and empower each other in the workplace specifically? And I would actually open this up to all of the panelists as a nice way to end this wonderful discussion that we should, Michael, next time, and Ivana, maybe make it 4 times as long and in person with food. Okay, thank you.
A great question. I think mentorship is key. Mentorship of people who are along the path but haven't gotten to where you are yet, who might be college students, law students, people who hope to work in a law firm as a litigator one day, but don't have models of people in the workplace to to show them the path. And so I've taken mentorship very seriously and have encouraged people around me who are also LGBT to do the same thing. Also advocacy in recruitment and promotion. I have a major role in interviewing and hiring paralegals, summer associates at our firm, and also a say as a partner and who else becomes a partner. And it's important to remember your role in advocating on behalf of people who are part of groups that have been historically marginalized and oppressed, including the LGBT community. At our firm, because I love to host parties, so no one had to twist my arm, but about 10 years ago, we began having an annual Pride event every June at our firm. And it's by far the best attended event at the firm. I've had to apologize a few times for having spent as much money as I have. But it's drawn positive attention to both the LGBT people at our firm and the cases we litigate on behalf of LGBT people. I mean, I'm really lucky to work at a place where there's no daylight between the type of cases we litigate and our commitment to an inclusive, progressive workplace. In fact, we sue corporations that discriminate, and have even found creative ways to bring cases for violations of corporate law against companies that discriminate and that allow sexual harassment in the workplace. So that I'm helped in terms of buy-in by the fact that we're already starting from a point where everyone's committed to it. It's just highlighting it and making people feel truly included. And I think that mentorship, advocacy in recruitment and promotion, and providing a forum for people to engage in community has been critical along the way.
Thank you. Anybody else with a reflection on that before Michael gives me the hook? Well, this conversation has been so rich, and it's been just an honor to be a part of it and to listen and learn from y'all. Really looking forward to what Ivana and Michael cook up next for us. But thank you so much for your leadership, for your grit, for being authentic and sharing. It's generosity of yours. And so with that, thank you. I will toss it over to Michael.
Well, Erika, thank you. What a powerful, beautiful hour. I had high expectations knowing each of you and just was blown away. So Ivana, thank you for your partnership in pulling this together. As you mentioned, we would love to do this in person. We hope this can be an event this year before the end of this year to bring you all. You happen to be in DC, most of you, so this is nice to have a nearby opportunity, but I know this conversation will continue. The idea of mentorship and helping the next generation of current students and graduates in our William & Mary community is so vital to the Vision 2026 plan that we've rolled out just weeks ago. And I think that each of you and what you're building in your own respective workplaces, in your industries, and as leaders of identity-based efforts is so powerful. And so the vision of where we as a democracy want to be and how William & Mary wants to be one of the leading institutions of fostering that across our country and around the world. So thank you for taking the time to plan this and prepare this. Really appreciate your voices. I do want to say one last thing, as Professionals Week is still going on. It's been a pleasure having people participate throughout the week. And we have one event tomorrow to celebrate, to get to know one another, to network and connect. And so I can't think of a better way to say, let's build our community even better. Let's make it stronger. Let's get to know one another. Really think about the things that were shared today and the reflections that were shared, how meaningful that you opened up and shared so much personal information experience. That's what makes a community stronger. When we get to learn from each other, when we storytell and we have fun doing it. So I've enjoyed this hour. Ivana, any last words of, just thank you. Again, enjoy your evening, everyone. And thank you so much for Erika, Aman, Nina, Rita, Doug. As always, thank you for your commitment to William & Mary. Take care and stay well.
Good night.
Good night.